Punchinello, Volume 1, No. 17, the 23rd of July, 1870 ***** Punchinello, Volume 1, Number 17, the 23rd of July, 1870 001.jpg, 278k, 002.jpg, 280k, The Mystery of Mr. E. Drood. An adaptation. By Orpheus C. Kerr. Chapter 11 -- continued. Bladums ushered in two waiters, one Irish and one German, who wore that look of blended long-suffering and extreme weariness of everything eatable, which, in this country, seems inevitably characteristic of the least personal agency in the serving of meals. There may be lands in which the not essentially revolting art of cookery can be practiced without engendering irritable gloom in the bosoms of its practitioners, and the spreading of tables does not necessarily entail upon the actors therein a despondency almost sinister. But the American kitchen is the home of beings who never laugh, save in that sardonic bitterness of spirit which grimly mocks the climax of human endurance in the burning of the soup, and the waiter of the American dining room can scarcely place a dish upon the board without making it eloquent of a blighted existence. Having dashed the stews upon the reading table before the fire, and rescued a drowning fly, from one of them with his least appetizing thumbnail, the melancholy Irish attendant polished the spoons with his pocket handkerchief and hurled them on either side of the plates. Perceiving that his German associate, in listlessly throwing the mugs of ale upon the table, had spilled some of the liquid, he hurriedly wiped the stain away with Edwin Drood's worsted muffler, and dried the sides of the glasses upon the napkin intended for Mr. Dibble's use. There was something of the wild resources of despair, too, in this man's frequent ghostly dispatch of the German after articles forgotten in the first trip, such as another cracker, the cover of the pepper cruet, the salt, and one more pinch of butter, and so greatly did his apparent dejection of soul increase as each supplementary luxury arrived and was recklessly slammed into its place, that, upon finally retiring from the room with his associate, his utter hopelessness of aspect gave little suggestion of the future proud political preferment to which, by virtue of his low estate and foreign birth, he was assuredly destined. Footnote 1. In anticipation of any critical objection to the introduction of a living fly in December, the adapter begs leave to suspect that an anachronism is always legitimate in a work of fiction when a point is to be made. Thus, in Chapter 8 of the inimitable Nicholas Nickleby, Mr. Squeers tells Nicholas that morning has come, and ready iced, too, and that the pumps froze while, only a few pages later, in the same chapter, one of Mr. Squeers' scholars is spoken of as weeding the garden. The whole scene had been a reproachful commentary upon the stiff American system of discouraging waiters from making remarks upon the weather, inquiring the cost of one's new coat, conferring with one upon the general prospects of his business for the season, or from indulging in any of the various light conversational diversions whereby barbers, Fulton Street tailors, and other depressed gymnasts, are occasionally and wholesomely relieved from the misery of brooding over their equally dispiriting avocations. After the departure of the future aldermen, or sheriffs, of the city, The good old lawyer accompanied his young guest in an expeditious assimilation of the stews, saying little, but silently regretting, for the sake of good manners, that Mr. Bladams could not eat oysters without making a noise as though they were alive in his mouth. At last, mug of ale in hand, he turned to his clerk. "Bladams." "Sir, to you," responded Mr. Bladams, hastily putting down the plate from which he had been drinking his last drop of stew, and grasping his own mug. "Your health, Bladams. Mr. Edwin joins me, I'm sure, and may the May hour that is, may your suppose we call it bump of happiness, may your bump of happiness increase." Staring thoughtfully, Mr. Bladams felt for the bump upon his head and, having scratched what he seemed to take for it, replied, "It's a go, sir. The bump has increased some since Kent's commentaries fell on it from that top shelf the other day." "I am going to toast my lovely ward," whispered Mr. Dibble to Edwin, "but I put Bladams first, because he was once a person to be respected, and I treat him with politeness in place of a good salary." "Success to the bump," said Edwin Drood, rather struck by this piece of practical economy, and newly impressed with the standard fact that politeness costs nothing. "And now," continued Mr. Dibble, with a wink in which his very ear joined, "I give you the peerless Miss Flora Potts. Bladams, please remember that there are others here to eat crackers besides yourself, and join us in a health to Miss Potts." "Let the toast pass, drink to the lass," cried Mr. Bladams, husky with crackers. "All ale to her." "Count me in," too, assented Edwin. "Dear me," said the old lawyer, breaking a momentary spell of terror occasioned by Mr. Bladams having turned blue and nearly choked to death in a surreptitious attempt to swallow a cracker which he had previously concealed in one of his cheeks. "Dear me. Although I am a square, practical man, I do believe that I could draw a picture of a true lover's state of mind tonight." "A regular chromo," wheezed Mr. Bladams, encouragingly, pretending not to notice that his employer was reaching an ineffectual arm after the crackers at his own elbow. "Subject to the approving, or correcting, judgment of Mr. E. Drood, I make bold to guess that the modern true lover's mind, such as it is rendered jerky by contemplation of the lady who has made him the object of her virgin affectations," proceeded Mr. Dibble, looking intently at Edwin, but still making farther and farther reaches toward the distant crackers, even to the increased tilting of his chair. "I venture the conjecture that if he has any darling pet name for her, such as Pinky Winky Little Fooly Chignonentally or Waxy Wobbles, he feels horribly ashamed if anyone overhears it, and coughs violently to make believe that B never said it." It was curious to see Edwin listening with changing color to this truthful exposure of his young mind, the while, influenced unconsciously, probably, by the speaker's example, he, too, had begun reaching and chair-tilting toward the crackers across the table. What time Mr. Bladams, at the opposite side of the board, had apparently sunk into a sudden and deep slumber, although from beneath one of his folded arms a finger dreamily rested upon the rim of the cracker plate, and occasionally gave it a little pull farther away from the approaching hands. "My picture," continued Mr. Dibble, now quite hoarse, and almost horizontal in his reaching, to Edwin Drood, also nearly horizontal in the same way my picture goes on to represent the true lover as ever eager to be with his dear one, for the purpose of addressing implacable glares at the other young man with more property, whom she says she always loved as a brother when they were children together, and of smiling bitterly and biting off the ends of his new gloves, which is more than he can really afford, at his salary, when she softly tells him that he is making a perfect fool of himself. My picture further represents him to be continually permeated by a consciousness of such tight boots as he ought not to wear, even for the beloved object, and of such readiness to have new cloth coats spoiled, by getting hair oil on the left shoulder, as shall yet bring him to a scene of violence with his distracted tailor. It shows him, likewise, as filled with exciting doubts of his own relative worth, that is, with self-questionings as to whether he shall ever be worth enough to buy that cantering imported saddle horse which he has already promised, to spend every summer in a private cottage at Newport, to fight off Western divorces, and to pay an eloquent lawyer a few thousands for getting him clear, on the plea of insanity, after he shall have shot the other young man with more property for wanting his wife to be a sister to him, again, as she was, you know, when they were children together. Edwin, despite the coldness of the season, had perspired freely during the latter part of the picture, and sought to disguise his uneasiness at its beautiful, yet severe truth, by a last push of his extended arm toward the crackers. Quickly observing this, Mr. Dibble also made a final desperate reach after the same object, so that both old man and young, while pretending to heed each other's words only, were 2/3 across the table, with their feet in the air and their chairs poised on one leg each. At that very moment, by some unhappy chance, while nearly the whole weight of the two was pressing upon their edge of the board, Mr. Bladams abruptly awoke, and raised his elbows from his edge, to relieve his arms by stretching. Released from his pressure, the table flew up upon two legs with remarkable swiftness, and then turned over upon Mr. Dibble and Mr. E. Drood, bringing the two latter and their chairs to the floor under a shower of plates and crackers, and resting invertedly upon their prostrate forms, like some species of four-pillared monumental temple without a roof. A person less amiable than the good Mr. Dibble would have borrowed the name of an appurtenance of a mill, at least once, as a suitable expression of his feelings upon such a trying occasion, but, instead of this, when Mr. Bladams, excitedly crying fire, lifted the overturned table from off himself and young guest, he merely arose to a sitting position on the littered carpet, and said to Edwin, with a smile and a rub, "Pray, am I at all near the mark in my picture?" "I should say, sir," responded Edwin, with a very strange expression of countenance, also rubbing the back of his head, "that you are rather hard upon the feelings of the unlucky lover. He may not show all that he feels." There he paused so long to feel his nose and ascertain about its being broken, that Mr. Dibble limped to his feet and ended that part of the discussion by hobbling to an open iron safe across the office. Taking from a private drawer in this repository a small paper parcel, containing a pasteboard box, and opening the latter, the old lawyer produced what looked like a long, flat white cord, with shining tips at either end. "This, Mr. Edwin," said he, with marked emotion, "is a staylace, with golden tags, which belonged to Miss Flora's mother. It was handed to me, in the abstraction of his grief, by Miss Flora's father, on the day of the funeral, saying that he could never bear to look upon it again. To you, as Miss Flora's future husband, I now give it." "A staylace," echoed Edwin, coming forward as quickly as his lameness would allow, and stanching his swollen upper lip with a handkerchief. "Yes," was the grave response. "You have undoubtedly noticed, Mr. Edwin, that in every fashionable romance, the noble and grenadine heroine has a habit of drawing herself up proudly whenever any gentleman tries to shake hands with her, or asks her how she can possibly be so majestic with him. This lace was used by Miss Flora's mother to draw herself up proudly with, and she drew herself up so much with it, that it finally reached her heart and killed her. I here place it in your hands, that you may ultimately give it to your young wife as a memento of a mother who did nothing by halves but die. If you, by any chance, should not marry the daughter, I solemnly charge you, by the memory of the living and the dead, to bring it back to me." Receiving the parcel with some awe, Edwin placed it in one of his pockets. "Bladums," said Mr. Dibble, solemnly, "you are witness of the transfer." Deponent, being duly sworn, does swear and cuss that he saw it, to the best of his knowledge and belief, returned the clerk, helping Mr. Drood to resume his overcoat. When in his own room, at Gowanus, that night, Mr. Dibble, in his nightcap, paused a moment before extinguishing his light, to murmur to himself, "I wonder, now, whether poor Potts confided his orphan child to me because he knew that I might have been the successful suitor to the mother if I had been worth a little more money just about then." What time, in the law office in town, Mr. Bladums was upon his knees on the floor, tossing crackers from all directions on the carpet into his mouth, like a farinaceous goblin, and nearly suffocating whenever he glanced at the disordered table. To be continued. The Free Baths. 0048.jpg, 87K. Punchinello begs to congratulate the Honourable W. M. Tweed upon his inestimable boon to the public, the free baths. With regard to a certain class and a very large class of the public of New York City, it has sometimes been cynically asked, will it wash? Since the establishment of free baths under the Department of Public Works, that question has been satisfactorily replied to in the affirmative. Hard-worked mechanics at once recognized the chance for a wash, and went at it with a rush. It was Coney Island come to town, with the roughs left behind, and the extortionate bathing dress men, and the other disagreeable features of that lovely but desecrated isle. In recognition of the decided success of the new baths, and of the vast benefit that must be derived from them by a large portion of the community, Punchinello begs to invest the Honourable W. M. Tweed with the blue ribbon of the OFB, or originator of the free baths. The plays and shows. 004b.jpg, 101k. Central Park Garden is the subject of this article. It is all very well for the editor of Punchinello to require me to write about the plays and shows, but how would he like to do it himself, with the thermometer at 103 degrees, and the 4th of July only just over? And then, inasmuch as I am not a white-hatted philosopher, writing of what I know about farming, how can I be expected to write of things which have no existence? For, with the exception of the Central Park Garden, and one or two minor places of amusement, there are no plays and shows at present in this happy city. We certainly owe the managers a debt of gratitude for closing their hot and glaring theatres during this intolerable month. Of course nobody was obliged to attend them while they were open, but then, when people were told that the theatres were crowded to an uncomfortable extent, they felt an irrepressible desire to go and be uncomfortable. It is one of the peculiar characteristics of man, as distinguished from the higher animals, that he will go through fire and water to get into a theatre which he is told is crammed to the point of suffocation, whereas he won't deign to enter one where he is sure to find a comfortable seat. Now the charm of the Central Park Garden consists in this, that the visitor can take his vapor bath in the 7th Avenue cars on his way to the garden, and can enjoy the sweet consciousness of being jostled and sat upon in the search for amusement, while he is still certain of finding pure air and plenty of room at the garden itself. By the by, it has just occurred to me that the 4th of July is properly a show. It might be called a burlesque, but for the fact that it is unaccompanied by the luxury of legs. Indeed, after the celebration is over, there are always fewer legs in the nation than there were at its commencement. There is no canon of criticism which would expurgate legs from the theatrical burlesque, but there are canons of 4th of July which do their best to abolish the incautious legs of patriotic youth. I reconsider my purpose of writing of the Central Park Garden, and will devote this column to the national show. I have somewhere read, not in Bancroft's History, of course, no man ever did that and lived, that the 4th of July was established in order to commemorate our deliverance from a government which taxed us with stamp duties. How happy ought we to be when we reflect that, thanks to our noble fathers who fought and bled at Long Branch, I should say Nahant at some watering place, I really forget precisely where, we have no taxes, and know not what a revenue stamp is like. Thank fortune, we have no share in the national debt of Great Britain, and have no national debt of our own that is worth mention. Besides, we are going to found the little debt that we do owe, so that nobody will ever be bothered about it again. I like this plan of funding debts, but, curiously enough, sordid capitalists and miserly landlords don't. I offered the other day to fund all my personal debts, in the shape of a long loan at 3%, but my creditors did not take kindly to the idea. Such is the sordid meanness which is too sadly characteristic of the merely commercial mind. But to return to our subject, which is, I believe, the Central Park Garden. It is curious how critics will differ. Here is a case in point. The other night, at the Central Park Garden, I sat near a table surrounded by 5 well-known musical critics. Theodore Thomas had just led his orchestra through the devious ways of the Tannhäuser Overture, and I naturally listened to hear the opinions which the critical five might express. This is what they really did say. First critic: "Thank heavens, the music is over for a few minutes. Now, boys, we'll have some more beer." Second critic: "Not any for me, thank you. I'll have a Jamaica sour." Third critic: "Bring me a claret punch." Fourth critic: "Whiskey cocktail." Fifth critic: "Well, I'll stick to beer. It's the best thing in this weather." What ought a man to think of the Tannhäuser, after hearing these five contradictory opinions? For my own part, I rather thought the cigars were a trifle too strong. And there is just the same difference of opinion about Theodore Thomas's merits as a conductor. On this occasion there were two aged and indigent musicians in the audience, who knew more about orchestral music than even the present president of the Philharmonic Society, and to each of them did I propound the question, is Thomas a good conductor? First aged person: "My dear sir, he doesn't conduct at all. His orchestra pays no attention to him, and plays in spite of the absurd and meaningless passes which he makes with his baton." Second AP: "My dear sir, he is the best conductor of the day. He has made his orchestra the best in the country, in fact, the only one. No man has done more for our musical public than has Theodore Thomas." And as I ordered a Limousinary beer for these aged persons, and pondered their slightly contradictory utterances in my mind, I heard a fair young creature in a scarlet Plimpton and a fleecy robe of Axminster remark, "Oh, that dear delightful Mr. Thomas! He is so perfectly lovely. And his coat fits him so divinely. He is ever so much handsomer than Karl Bergman. While I agree most heartily with everything that I heard at the Garden on the occasion which I have mentioned, I am not quite sure that the establishment is either a play or a show. On the whole, I don't think I had better say anything about it. If anybody has a different opinion, let him express himself. If he don't like to take the trouble, let him apply to Adams Express Company, which will express him to the end of the world, if he should so desire." Matador. Crispin vs. Cooley. For Crispin, old Crispin, patron saint of all cordwainers, Mr. Punchinello has a profound respect. When still a young man, AD 1125, he was well acquainted with the venerable gentleman, and the very beautiful pair of shoes which Mr. P wears when in full costume, vide his portrait on the title page, were healed and tapped for him by the hands of Crispin himself. They are still in excellent order, although, in these very shoes, Mr. P walked his celebrated match against time, beating that swift old party and doing his 1,000 miles in 24h, 12m, 30s. Between Mr. P and shoes there is a well-marked resemblance. The shoe has a soul and he has a soul. The shoe is both useful and ornamental, and so is he. The shoe has an upper, and Mr. P.'s motto is, "Upper and still up." In fact, he is so well satisfied with his understanding, that he would not stand in any other man's shoes for any consideration, and so long as the Crispins will make him fits which are not convulsions, and will sow in a way which shall produce no crop of corns, and remind him, by the neatness of their work, of lovely Peggy, it is the intention of the Senor Punchinello to patronize the Native American all altogether. For John Chinaman also, the Herr von Punchinello has a great admiration. He never takes tea, having been advised by his physician to drink nothing but lager beer, with an occasional beaker of rum, gin, or brandy, or Monongahela, or whatever may be handy on the shelf. Nevertheless, as an admirer of the fair sex, Squire Punchinello believes in old Hyson and Hyson Jr., in Oolong and Bohea, in Souchong and gunpowder, in black and green, and if there were scarlet or yellow or blue teas, Colonel Punchinello would equally admire, steep, sweeten and sip them. Nor is Dr. Punchinello less an admirer of the explosive firecracker, sent to us by John, to assist us in the preservation of our liberties. The Honorable Mr. Punchinello declines dogs, in pies, and opium, in pipes, nor can he say whether he approves of birds' nests, in porridge, as he has never eaten any, and never wants to, although he is, in his way, an acknowledged nester. But still, Professor Punchinello wishes John well, if for no other reason, at least out of respect for his old friend Confucius, with whom, some years ago, he was extremely intimate, many of the finest things in the books of that venerable sage having been suggested to him by Don Punchinello. The reader, therefore, if he is of an acute turn of mind, will easily perceive that two distinct emotions fill the bosom of plain Mr. P, and are hitting out at each other with extreme liveliness. He desires for the Crispins all the wages they can manage to get. He desires for his friend Hiya, a boundless growth of the pigtail of prosperity, and the only question is whether this is a vegetable, the growth of which should be encouraged upon the Yankee Doodle soil. As probably the most profound political economist of this or any other age, after a week's tremendous thinking upon this subject, after having 1,000 times resolved to give it up, Mr. P has received the following letter from North Adams, Mass., which he hastens to lay before his readers. 0058.jpg, 19K, exactly so. Right, John, perfectly right. Our views, exactly. Our mutual friend, Professor Wang Ho, of the University of Pekin, couldn't have put it more neatly. But don't you think, if you are coming to America at all, that it would be well to come as the rest come, without selling yourself, body, soul and pigtail, to some shrewd Dutch driver, like Koopmanscoop, for instance? Oh John, my John. When you do come, let it be to freeze to the American eagle, and with a firm determination to make him your own beloved bird. When you work, be sure that you get the worth of your work. No chains and slavery, anything like them. And especially no nonsense about being sent back in your coffin to the Central Flowery Kingdom. A country which is good enough to live in, is good enough to be buried in. And what is this missive which we have received through the post, and which we have since kept locked up in a powder-proof safe. 005B.jpg, 24K, O ye beloved children of Crispin! Why send to us these mysterious, manslaughterous and mortal hieroglyphics? Of course you don't mean to kill Mr. P, and even if you did, you couldn't do it, for the great P is one of the immortals. Neither, if you will but stop to think about it, will you molest poor Hiya because he wears a tail and eats dog cutlets fried in crumb. Before you indulge in the luxury of murder, or even the minor divertissements of mobbing, ducking, hustling, and stoning, why not try the expedient of making it up with the bosses? Mr. Punchinello has thought of visiting North Adams, Lynn, and other shoe sites, for the purpose of offering the help of his eminently judicial mind in reconciling employer and employee, but fearing that he might get his nose, which is a beautiful and dignified protuberance, most shamefully pulled for his pains, he has concluded to keep the peace by keeping out of the scrimmage. But, as there never was a misunderstanding yet which time and common sense could not clear up, Mr. P contents himself with exhorting the bosses to be considerate, the Crispinians to be reasonable, and John Chinaman to cut off his tail, whatever natural tears its loss may occasion. See the point. Edwin and Angelina took a sail up the lovely Hudson. As they sailed on and on, Edwin said to his Angelina, "Dearest love, don't let your cerulean eyes rest upon West Point." "And why not, darling old Tootsicums?" asked Angelina. "Because they have colored pupils in them, light of my life," replied Edwin. 006.jpg, 150K, foam winking sad smiley 1, or How Jenkins Went Summering. A lyrical drama. Played with immense success at the summer residence of General Grant, at Long Branch, for 1002 nights. 2. Act I Scene Bedroom in Attic of 7th Class Boarding House. Furniture, a bed, 2 chairs, and a table. The table is ornamented with a cup of coffee, a loaf of bread, and a plate of hash, knife, etc. Enter from the adjoining hall, Mr. Jenkins Crusoe, dressed in a tattered morning wrapper. Jenkins. LOQ. Phew. I can't stand this hot weather. I must go into the country. But where shall I go? 3. Sings. If I'm any judge of the weather, the days are refreshingly hot, though one place is as good as another. I think I'll get out of this spot, but where shall I go? Where shall I go? Where shall I go for the summer? Looks at table. Ha, ha. Ho, ho. My breakfast will be cold. Reflectively. I guess I'll eat. Sits down and hurts the hash. Enter washerwoman, shoemaker, servant girl, and hatter. They dance around the table, like English blondes. All sing. Poor old Jenkins Crusoe, why did you go for to do so? Jenkins. 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 Poor old Jenkins Crusoe. Servant girl. Sings. Pay for the floor I have scrubbed, sir. Washerwoman. Pay for the clothes I have rubbed, sir. Hatter. Pay for the hats you have worn, sir. Shoemaker. Pay for the boots that are gone, sir. All sing. Poor old Jenkins Crusoe, why did you go for to do so? Jenkins. 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 Poor old Jenkins Crusoe. Jenkins rises from the table and sings. I've a castle in Spain, filled with ingots of gold, I've a mine in Golconda, whose wealth is untold. Then dry up your tears, come out of your sorrow, I'll pay what I owe, I'll pay you tomorrow, I'll pay you tomorrow, all that I owe. Servant girl at al dance shoe fly and sing. We feel, we feel, we feel, we feel like a young typhoon, we hope, we hope, we hope, we hope you'll be paying soon. Exeunt servant girl, it al. Jenkins. Loq. Well, come soon. Now I must go. I hate to cheat the provider of that 7th-class hash, but I must beat on somebody. Well, let them all come, and devil take the hindmost. I'll pack my valise. Puts things in his valise. Sings. It's rich that I am I not? Just look at the fixings I've got, here's a brush, here's a comb, both are for fixing my dome, a toothbrush and collar, that's all, my baggage's conveniently small. Jenkins. Loq. That valise is too thin. No landlord would take me on that. It's consumptive looking. I'll fill it with newspapers. Here, this will do, this triple sheet Tribune, with Mrs. McFarlane's epistle. That'll fill it. Shoves paper in valise. Now for my hat and coat. Puts them on. Off I go. Sings. I'm off, I'm off, I'm off for Long Branch, I'll have a jolly old time, I'll have a jolly old time, I'll bathe in the surf, I'll ride on the turf, dance with the girls, steal all their pearls, and have a jolly old time. Exit Jenkins, curtain, footnote 1, must not be confounded with surf. Footnote 2. The reader will notice that this drama was more popular than the Arabian Nights, which only ran for 1001 nights. Footnote 3. The music of these songs can be purchased at Timbuktu. Act 2. Scene: steamboat landing. Real steamboat, real landing, real water, real smoke coming out of a real chimney on the steamboat. Real captain and real passengers. It is understood that there is to be no make-believe about the fares. A real chambermaid in the back cabin would add to the effectiveness of the scene, but is not an absolute necessity. The author would here say that he has a proper respect for the auxiliaries of the stage, and, in a scene, which belongs to the stage carpenter, the author would be cruel if he marred the effects of the scenery by mere words. He therefore uses as little of those superfluities as possible. In a nautical scene, of course, some words will slip in, which it would be improper to print, but as that is chicken, the polite for foul, language, the author, of course, is not responsible for it. As the curtain rises, Real women with real oranges parade the dock, singing, "Come buy our sweet oranges, come buy." Hark, as we holler, "6 for $1, come buy our sweet oranges, come buy." Real scream from steam whistle. Jenkins obeys the orange women, and goes by on a run. Steamboat leaves wharf 22 feet out in stream, when Jenkins reaches string piece. Grand and terrific jump by Jenkins, 22 feet in the clear. He lands on the steamer, and all the sailors shout. Curtain, as in a realistic scene one must stick to reality. You will notice that I made Jenkins leap 22 feet, which is, I am informed, the exact space jumped over by the father of his country on a festive occasion. I would say to the young man who objects to carpenter scenes, that he can go out during this act and indulge in his favorite beverage, gin and milk. Act 3. Scene: lawn in front of Continental Hotel at Long Branch. Enter Jenkins, disguised in a second-hand silk hat, and a claw-hammer coat, with a hand organ on his back. He stops before one of the windows, grinds the hand organ, and sings, "Gaily the troubadour touched his organ, as he came staggering home with a can, numerous heads put out of numerous windows." As all the following are said at the same moment, the reader is here requested to take a long breath. First window. Stop that howling. 2D dry up, you idiot. 3D cork that organ. 4th bust that music box. And so on, ad infinitum, until all the soups are used up. The soups can probably supply their own language of the above kind. Windows shut. Enter Juliet, from window. Jenkins. Fair Juliet. Juliet. Beautiful Jenkins. Jenkins. Lovest thou Crusoe? She rests on his bosom. Jenkins. But Snubs, the widower. Ha, ha. Ho, ho. Juliet. Sings. I never loved him in my life, I never loved his baby. I'll slip out some dark night, and marry Jenkins, maybe. Jenkins. Sings. Pretty maid, if I kiss, will you faint away, will you cry for your pa, pretty maiden, say. If I press dainty lips, will you make a screech? If you do, I'll away, and you cannot peach. Pretty maid, do not faint, charming little belle, mind you now, pretty maid, do not kiss and tell. He charges upon her lips and then returns to the charge. Juliet. Sings. You are going far away from poor Juliet, and there's no one left to love me now, I fear you'll too forget. Just at this moment, enter Heavy Father, and kicks Jenkins. Heavy Father then seizes Juliet and leads her into house. Jenkins skedaddles. Enter Jenkins at side, looks carefully around, and finding the coast clear, comes in, slings the organ on his back, and sings, I went, as meek as any lamb, he took me, yes, he took me for some other man. Curtain. The manager should have the curtain in hand, because the last pathetic song of Jenkins will no doubt be encored. Errata before the word played in the fifth line, insert the words will be. After the word played in the fifth line, insert the words, if it is ever played at all. Lot 007.jpg, 118K, on dogs. Dogs are very useful animals, especially when you have nothing handy for dinner, and can get them to catch a rabbit for you. A dog is a very devoted animal, and should not be taxed, as its master often is, by its various eccentricities when it makes off with his dinner, for instance, or leaves dental impressions on the meat in the pantry. Indeed, its owner is sometimes tempted to imitate his canis in the lifting business, and often with such success as to get board and lodging free. Dogs are pugnacious critters. I had one that set on every fellow of its kind he came across, and took such an affectionate grab of his foe, that nothing would divide them till death did them part. I noticed, however, that this dog of mine was mostly fond of the smaller fry, attacking them most vigorously, and barking from the doorsteps at the larger. I once had a dorgie, diminutive of dog, alias puppy, which was very fond of me, especially when I gave it something nice, which is nothing but human nature in the third degree. It got knocked about a good deal, especially its legs, so that it contracted a sort of hopping movement. I could not get it to catch mice. It seemed to think them third cousins, or something of the kind, and was very fond of playing with them, while, on the other hand, I had a large dog which we kept by us when we took grain from the rick. I think he managed about 30 per minute. I never could follow them down his throat, but his increased bulk was a kind of index to the number. He generally lay by the kitchen fire 24 hours after his banquet, to recover himself. I once tried my small dog at the swimming business, by throwing him into a shallow pond. I had to go in after the beast pretty smart, boots, trousers, socks, and all. He and I had a roast by the fire that evening. My trousers, however, getting overdone in the operation, I lost $4 by this experiment. Dogs are very fond of coat tails and back pockets, when some unseen attraction lies there. They don't believe in appetite assuagers wasting their fragrance on the desert air, and will make vigorous efforts to take possession of the hidden treasure, at any risk whatsoever. As this is the time I and my dog go visiting, I must jerk up the machine for the present. I hope my remarks have done you some good. The motto I always follow is, brevity is the soul of wit. Bill Bysky. Inspiration vs perspiration. Flannel, being an absorbent, has usually been recommended as the best material for underclothing in sweltering weather, such as that of the present summer. An ingenious gentleman of this city, however, has discovered that a full undersuit of blotting paper is by far more efficacious than flannel, and he has taken out a patent for the idea. The article will not come under the denomination of dry goods. The Right Man. A Brooklyn item states as follows: Justice Lynch is to have a new courthouse in the 21st Ward. Why in that ward, only? Have we not a 4th Ward here, in New York, and a 6th Ward, and an 8th Ward, and a 17th ward. Judge Lynch is just the man needed in each and all of these wards, and he may be found there yet. Strangely coincidental. The ice panic and the coolie problem. 008.jpg, 299k, our portfolio. It is related of the Prince of Wales, that, driving home from the late Derby races, he lifted his hat to a group of ladies, and by accident dropped a glove, whereupon the fair ones dived eagerly into the dirt for it, while His Royal Highness laughed heartily at the scramble. Young ladies this side of the Atlantic, it may be said with justice, are quite as practiced divers, but when the darlings duck their fingers into the dirt before any young fellow here, it more frequently happens that they are not after his glove, or his heart, so much as his pocket-book. The practice, quite common among rustic gentlemen, of visiting the city for the purpose of beholding the elephant doubtless suggested to the late Sir Thomas Browne the following advice which he gave his son, who was about entering upon his studies in the department of natural history: when you see the elephant, observe whether he bendeth his knees before and behind forward differently from other quadrupeds, as Aristotle observeth, and whether his belly be the softest and smoothest part. It is possible that some elephants have a habit of bending at the knee joints differently from others. Indeed, this reflection is more than likely when we consider how many elephants there are, and upon what evil doings many of them are bent, but it is not so evident that a neophyte in this branch of knowledge could derive any benefit from following Sir Thomas's injunctions. Punchinello begs leave to substitute for the above some advice which he thinks would produce a vastly more salutary effect, and that to keep away from elephants altogether. Men of experience will bear out our assertion, that the much talked of horns of a dilemma are nothing to the tusks of an elephant, for it is possible for a person to hang upon the aforesaid horns without fatal results, but the party who is impaled upon the tusks of an elephant is generally ever after indifferent to the opinions of mankind. Critical. "Where do you intend to summer?" asked Jowler of Growler, one day in the heated term. "Summer," retorted Growler, "is that what you call it? I call it simmer." Personal. Prince Arthur has taken his departure for England. It is but just to say that the regiment to which he belongs is not the same rifle brigade by which the Coney Island boats are controlled. Grant's blackbird pie. Sing a song o' sixpence. Sing about a treaty got up to supply 500,000 blackbirds for the Union pie. When the fact was published, swindlers at Sing Sing said the author's one of us, let us call him king. Fish was at the Treasury clamoring for the money, Grant was in the Blue Room looking blithe and sunny, Morville, in the Senate, brought things to a close. Grant's 500,000 blackbirds vanished with the nose. Suggested by the heat of the coolie question. Knees that the Crispins are constantly down on Chinese. Probable result of that Chinese puzzle. A Chinese fizzle. Eclipse of the sun. Jimmy the boot black says he shines for all price 10 cents. To Ulysses. On the rejection of the Bayes Treaty. Behold how fickle fortune the great Ulysses treats, gives him victories in wartime, in peace heaps up defeats. His southern laurels linger a coronet of praise, but a friendly senate withers his San-doming anbase. 009.jpg, 288k, Hiram Jean at the Tower of Babel. He interviews an old settler, a remarkable narrative. While in New York, a few days since, I was standing in the rear of the old city hall, gazing onto the unfinished marble building which stands there. My eye gobbled up the scene afore me, like a young weasel a sucking of eggs, when an old wrinkled-featured silver-haired and snowy-bearded individual touched me on the shoulder, and interrogated me thus wisely: "Stranger, you seem to be stuck to make out what that unfinished building is." "Kurzaka, old host," said I, "and I wouldn't mind standing the lager to find out." "Come with me to yonder pile of stones," said the old fella, "and I will relate a tale, which, for its mysteriousness, uses the chemical analysis of a plate of boarding-house hash." "Wall, old Methuselah," said I, as our legs was dangling over the pile of stones, "unwind your yarn, but don't let your imagination go further than a Bohemian's." He then began the following history: In ancient times there was a philosopher. Horace Greeley was his connovit. He was editor of a daily newspaper. He took it into his nozzle one day to write some essays on what he knowed of farming, which he was about as well posted on as a porpoise is about climbing a tree. One day this jerked farmer, by Brevet, writ an article about irrigation. He told farmers that, in dry seasons, if they dammed the little streams which crossed their farms, the water would set back, and overflow their land, and keep their gardens sozzling wet, and make things grow bully. He was a great advocate of dams. He used to become so absorbed in his favorite pastime, that a fellow man, if he irritated the philosopher, became small streams pro tempore, and were damned pretty sudden. "What, you don't mean to say that an editor swore in them days?" said I, interrupting the old man. "They occasionally took a hand in that business, and when they got onto a fit, could cuss and swear equal to the beat of us," said he. "Wall," said I thought they was all good moral men, like Theodore Tilton and Anna Dickinson." "Oh, no," he replied. "Editors in them days used to fat up on swearing." He then resumed: "Farmers throughout the land tried H.G.S. damming ways. They dammed all the streams, and anybody who didn't like their style of doing things got served in the same manner. The consequence was, there was a flood, yes sir, a flood. Brooklyn, Jersey and Hoboken ferryboats was swamped, and the passengers all drowned. To be a coroner them times was money in a fella's pocket, as the inquest business was the best business a-goin' outside of any well-organized ring. Only one boatload was saved." Jim Fisk, who was always on the lookout for a muss, was long-headed enough to own that craft. It was run by Captain Noah, who knowed what was coming. Noah took his family aboard, and as he owned a menagerie, he took all of his wild animals aboard too, besides the members of the press, who kept their papers posted of the doiness aboard that ark. In about 40 days' time, every damned stream busted away, and the waters dried up. And the boat ran ashore and got stuck fast, in one of them new-fashioned tar pavements. The Common Council invited Noah and his folks to a lager beer garden and treated them to a banquet, at the city's expense. Noah, who liked his soothing syrup, got drunker than a sensation preacher, on gin and milk, an orthodox drink them times. He finally went to sleep in the gutter, after undressing hisself and hanging all his clothes on a lamp post. Ham, a son of Captain Noah's, discovering his confused parent in a suit rather more comfortable than modest, was so mortified at his dad's nakedness, that the mortification became sot, and when Noah awoke from his sobering off sleep, his son was blacker than the ace of spades. Noah didn't like niggers. Not much he didn't. He hated Emerson or a pea cracker hates a Fenian. Seeing that his shield had changed his political sentiments, he Horace Greeley'd him in the following well-known words, "Cussed be Canaan." Ham wasn't to be fooled in that style by the governor, so he got Butler, whose surname was Benjamin, into whose sack was found a silver cup, and I believe a few spoons, Sickles, Logan, Longstreet, and a lot of other chaps, to change their complexion. With the assistance of these men, Noah and his party was floored, and the 15th Amendment waxed mighty and strong, especially with the mercury at 100 degrees in the shade. Folks was getting wicked and wickeder all the time. Members of Congress was drawing the wool over the goddess of liberty's eyes, and ramming their hands way down into her purse. Cadetships were being sold to the highest bidder. One day the wise men of Gotham said one to another, "Let us build us a tower which H.G. can't flood, if he dams from now till doomsday." A big Injun took the contract. As Oofty Goofed, a Dutch German, remarked, "He vash got tam many oder braves to give him a boost." Street pavements were laid on Fifth Avenue, which the wind took up, and the air smelled like a mixture of coal tar and Scotch snuff. Bulls and bears of Wall Street had a day of Egyptian darkness. It was called Black Friday. Shoofly was sung in our national councils. Banks were robbed, and judges went snucks with the robbers. Men got on fits of temporary insanity and clubbed their wives over the head or popped off editors with a 6-shooter. Virtuous and respectable ladies were Spencerized in the halls of Gusties, and the 12 Temptations was drawing crowded houses. "See here, old man," said I, "hain't you pillin' on the agony rather too thick?" "Facts, Squire," said he, "truth is stronger than friction." About these times, he continued, things was becoming slightly mixed. The different tribes couldn't suck cider through the same straw anymore. There was a confusion of tongues and a mixing of contracts. The great Sachem and the young democracy had each other by the ear, while the big Injun was bound to scratch his assailers bald-headed. In this reign of high daddyism, the young democracy was scalped, and that ere building afore us, the great Tower of Babel, come to a dead standstill, because the politicians couldn't understand each other, and folks didn't know where the money was all gone to. The old man paused. I sprung to my feet. "And this," I exclaimed, is the mighty Babel. Would that I possessed some of the fortunes which has been made on thee. Would that I was a contractor, said I, or in presence of the great building which caused so many to sin. In my enthusiasm I burst forth in that well-known hymn, I want to be a contractor, and with contractors share. After I got cooled down I looked for the old man, and sure born he had rigged off. I took a beeline for a nap or in refreshment stand, and cooled my excited brain with a fried dough, a nut, a duck's, Punchinello. Yours and so forth Thly, Hiram Bean, Esquires, late Gusties of the Peace. All stuff. That crusty old bachelor, come grumble, objects to the franchise being extended to women, on the ground that, since they have become so accustomed to padding their persons, they would inevitably take to stuffing the ballot boxes. Chicago eccentricities. A newspaper item tells about a horse in Chicago that chews tobacco. Well, we can beat that in New York. Only a few days ago we saw Commodore Vanderbilt driving one of his fast teams in Harlem Lane, and both the horses were smoking like mad. But the item adds that the Chicago horse actually picks the hostler's pocket of tobacco. Well, that is just what one might expect of a Chicago horse. The watering places. Punchinello's vacations. After all, there is nothing like nature, in her prime validity. When man attempts to add a finishing touch to the loveliness of the forest, lake, or ocean, he makes a botch of it. What would the glowing tropics be, if park commissioners had charge of them? The heart, sick of the giddy flutterings of man, seeks the sympathy of the shadowy dell, where the jingle of coin is heard not, and where the votaries of fashion flaunt not their vain tissues in the ambient air. So, last week, thought Mr. P., and the moment he could get away he went on a little trip to the dismal swamp. There he found nature, there was prime validity indeed. An instantaneous rapport took place between his feelings and the scene, of which the delicious loveliness can be imagined from this picture. 0128.jpg, 50k, as he slowly floated along the shingle canal, from Suffolk to the dismal, what raptures filled his soul. Here, in the recesses of that solemn mixture of trees and water, which they were rapidly approaching, he could commune with his own soul, as it were. Mr. P. had never communed with his own soul, as it were, though he knew it must be a nice thing, because he had read so much about it. So he determined to try it. It was a delightful anticipation, like scenting a new fancy drink. But his reflections were rudely interrupted. The men who propelled the scow which Mr. P. had chartered, had not pushed it more than 4 or 5 miles into the mystic recesses of the swamp, when they suddenly stopped with a cry of breakers ahead. Mr. P. rushed to the bow, and there he beheld 2 doleful heads just peering above the waters of the narrow canal. He started back in amazement. He thought, at first, that they were naiads. They could not be dryads, or some other watery spirits of these wilds. But he soon saw that they were nothing of the kind. It was only Messrs. Sklenk, of Ohio, and Kelly, of Pennsylvania, and through the limpid water it was easy to see that each of them was endeavoring to raise a sunken log from the bottom. 012b.jpg, 105k. Why, what in the world are you doing here? Cried Mr. P. Mr. Skank, of Ohio, looked up sadly, and, dropping his log upon the bottom, stood upon it, and thus replied, "You may well be surprised, Mr. Punchinello, but we are here for the public good. We have reason to suspect that, following the example of the Chinese opium smugglers, the vile traitors who are trying to break down our iron interests have smuggled quantities of scrap iron into this country, and it is our belief that these sunken logs have been bored and are full of it." At this Mr. P laughed right out. "Oh, you may laugh if you please," cried Skank, of Ohio, "and perhaps you can tell me why these logs are so heavy, why they lie here at the bottom instead of floating, why." But at this instant he slipped from the log on which he was standing, and with a splash and a bubbling, he disappeared. The men who were pushing the scow thought this an admirable opportunity to pass on, and shouting to Kelly, of Pennsylvania, to bob his head, the gallant bark floated safely over these enthusiastic conservators of our iron interests. Although diverted for a time by this incident, a shadow soon began to spread itself gradually over the mind of Mr. P. Was there, then, no place where the subtle influence of man did not spread itself like a noxious gas, where, oh, where could one commune with his own soul, as it were? At length they reached Lake Drummond, that placid pool in the somnolent shades, and Mr. P put up at the house of a melancholy man, with a fur cap, who lived in a cabin on the edge of the lonely water. For supper they had catfish, and perch, and trout, and 7-up, and euchre, and poker, and when the meal was over Mr. P went out for a moonlight row upon the lake. He had to make the most of his time, for it would take him so long to get back to Nassau Street, you know. He had not paddled his scow more than half an hour over the dark but moon-streaked waters of the lake, when he met with the maiden who, all night long, by her firefly lamp, doth paddle her light canoe. This estimable female steered her bark alongside the scow, and to the startled Mr. P she said, "Have you my tickets?" 012c.jpg, 96k, tickets, cried Mr. P. Me, tickets? What tickets? Why, one ticket, of course, on the Norfolk, Petersburg and Richmond line, and a through ticket from Richmond to New York, by way of Fredericksburg and Washington. What other tickets could I mean? I know nothing about them, said Mr. P. And what can you possibly want with railroad tickets? Oh, I am going to leave here, said she. Indeed, cried Mr. P. Going to leave here, this lake, this swamp, this firefly lamp? To leave this spot, rendered sacred to your woes by the poem of the gifted More No More, cried she. I'm tired of hearing everybody that comes to this pond sing in that doleful song. That is to say, said Mr. P, with a smile, if your canoe is birch, you are sycamore. That's so, she gravely grunted. But tell me, said Mr. P, where in the world can you be going? At this the maiden took a straw, and ramming it down the chimney of her lamp, stirred up the flies until they glittered like dollar jewelry. Then she chanted, in plaintive tones, the following legend: 3 women came, one moonlight night, and tempted me away. They said, no longer on this lake, good maiden, must you stay. We're Susanna and Anna D., and Lucy S. also, and what a lone female can do we want the world to know. No better instance can we give, oh, Indian maid, than you, how woman can, year after year, paddle her own canoe. Just so said Mr. P. But don't you think that as you are, that is to say that not being of corporeal substance, by which I mean having been so long departed, as it were, or, to speak more plainly, oh, yes, I know dead, you mean, said the maiden. But that makes no difference. They'll be glad enough of a ghost of an example. Yes, yes, said Mr. P., and yet their cause is good enough. I don't see why they should make up. He would have said more, but turning, he saw that the Indian maid, despairing of her tickets, had gone. The next day Mr. P. went home himself. He communed with his own soul, as it were, for a little while, and has no doubt it did him a deal of good. But it would take so long to get back to his office, you see. As a cheap watering place, where there are no fancy drives or fancy horses, no club houses, no big hotels, no gay company, nor anything to tempt a man to sacrifice health and money in the empty pursuit of pleasure, Mr. P. begs to recommend the Dismal Swamp. If he knew of any other watering place of which as much might be said, he would mention it, but he don't. Notes from Chicago. In the spring a young man's fancies lightly turn to thoughts of love and picnics, and this is the time for them. Consequently, the attention of the Western public is turned thoroughly and religiously to what may be considered as one of the most important results of civilization and refinement. We, the Western public, regard picnics as highly advantageous to health and beauty, promoting social sympathy and high-toned alimentiveness, advancing the interests of the community and the ultimate welfare of the nation. In the first place, they are the means, working indirectly, but surely, of encouraging the domestic virtues and affections, the peace and harmony of families, because on these festive occasions, the lunch is the most striking and attractive feature, and, in order to obtain this in its highest perfection, the culinary abilities of the lady participants are necessarily called into action, those talents which have fallen somewhat into disrepute, notwithstanding Professor Blott's magnanimous efforts to restore the glories of the once honored culinary art. Therefore a picnic may be considered as a great moral agency in promoting domestic happiness, for what is so likely to touch the heart and arouse the slumbering sensibility of a husband and father, as a roast of beef done to a charm, or an omelette soufflé presenting just that sublime tint of yellowness which can only be attained by means of the most delicate refinement and discrimination. No other attention, however flattering, is so soon recognized, or gratefully appreciated. After one of these innocent festivals has been fully decided upon, then we always select a day when gathering clouds predict, most unmistakably, a coming storm, because, what would a picnic be without some excitement of this kind? A pudding minus the sauce, a sandwich without the mustard, a joke without the point. What pleasure could there be in a dry picnic? Ladies never appear to such excellent advantage, never are so utterly bewitching, as when, with light summer dresses bedraggled and dirty, they cling helplessly to their protectors, or run in frantic haste to some place of shelter, for it is only when a woman, or a gentle bovine, runs, that the poetry of motion is fully realized. Then the gentlemen. Under what circumstances are they ever so chivalric as during a pouring rain, when, wet to the skin, they assist the faintly shrieking beauties over the mud puddles, and hold umbrellas tenderly above chignons and uncrimping crimps? To be sure, they do not often act as Sir Walter Raleigh did, but then they do not wear velvet cloaks, and what would be the wit of throwing a piece of broadcloth or white linen into the mud? We have champagne picnics, lemonade and cold water picnics, and some, which, although they cannot be classed under the head of hot water, still manage, before they are through, to get all the participants into it. We have widows and widowers picnics, a kind of reunion for the encouragement of mutual consolation, where, meandering through green fields and under nodding boughs, they can talk or muse upon the virtues of the dear departed and the probable merits of the coming man or woman. Then the antimatrimonials have theirs, too, always exceedingly select, where the men look frightened, and the women indignant, and which partakes somewhat of the character of a Methodist prayer meeting, the gentlemen all clinging to each other as if for protection, evidently in bodily fear of another Sabine expedition, with the order of the programme, however, a little reversed in regard to the two sexes. The sanitary department also indulges in a little treat of this kind, and in such a case, it becomes really a duty. After guarding the city's health for so long a time, after sternly following up scarlet fevers, smallpoxes, and ship plagues, and driving them forth from their chosen haunts, it certainly needs to look after its own constitution a little, and sharpen, by country airs and odors, the powers probably deteriorated amid the noxious vapors of city alleys and byways. The Teachers' Institute, too, looking at the thing physiologically, psychologically, and phrenologically, after mature deliberation, conclude to descend to a little harmless amusement, contriving, however, to mingle some instructive elements with the frivolous ones that less enlightened spirits delight in. For instance, the flowers, that are truly the alphabet of angels to the simple souls that love the violets and daisies for their own sweet sakes, offer a very different alphabet to the schoolmarms and professors. They are no longer flowers, but specimens, each bud and blossom pleading in vain for life, as ruthless fingers coolly dissect them to discover whether they are poly or molyandria. And what an ignoramus you must be, if you do not know that a balloon vine is a Cardiospinum halicactum. The feast on these occasions is that of reason alone, encyclopedias and dictionaries being all the nourishment required, although a stray bottle here and there might hint at the flow of a little something beside soul. Then there are the Good Templars picnics, where water, cold water for me is supposed to be the sentiment of every heart, mixing the beverage sometimes, however, with a little innocent tea, or coffee, and the Masonic festivals, wear pretty white aprons and silver fringes, shining amid green dells and vales, present quite a picturesque and imposing appearance, and the Fenians, looking sometimes greener than the haunts they are seeking. Then every distinct and individual Sunday school in the city has a picnic, which it would be well to attend, if you are anxious to see the diversities and eccentricities of youthful appetites fearfully illustrated when the loaves and fishes were distributed. There could not have been many growing boys present, and beside these, the family picnics, most cozy little affairs, represented by one big fat man, one delicate-faced woman, one maiden aunt, 4 graduated boys, and 5 graduated girls. All piled into one big fat carriage, drawn by 2 big fat horses. But it is the Germans who take the palm, and here language fails, though beer doesn't. Comic zoology. Genus Squalus the shark. Linnaeus classifies the sharks as the Squalidae family, and they are, upon the whole, as unpleasant a family as a squalid castaway would desire to meet with in a squall. They are all carnivorous, cartilaginous, and cantankerous. No fish culturist, from St. Anthony to Seth Green, has thought it worthwhile to take them in hand, with the view of reforming them, and their vices are as objectionable now as they were 3,000 years ago. If a sailor falls overboard, the contiguous shark considers it a casus belli, and immediately makes a pitch at the tar, with the intention of putting itself outside of him. Failing in that, it generally shears off a limb before it shears away. Herds of sharks instinctively follow fever ships, and when the dead are thrown into the sea, are seen by the seamen in the shrouds, ready to perform the office of undertakers. In the vicinity of the trades, they sometimes lie under the counters of merchantmen for days together. Nothing comes amiss to them, from a midshipman to a marrow-bone, and it may be interesting to politicians to know that repeaters and rings have occasionally been found in the maws of these monsters. They bite readily at salt horse and, when hooked with a rattan in throat, may be yanked on board with the bite of a hawser. An enormous specimen sometimes gets caught in a forecastle yarn. In this case, never interfere with the thread of the narrative by asking impertinent questions, however difficult it may be to hoist it in. Sharks abound at Newport, Long Branch, Cape May, and other watering places, at this season of the year, and many victims are seized there by the legs. The bottlenose shark is to be found in every harbor, generally in the vicinity of the bar. He may be known from the other varieties by the redness of his gills. He is often seen disporting himself among the shallows, but is usually too deep to be pulled up. White sharks are frequently observed hovering about emigrant ships in the vicinity of the Battery, and the blue shark is now and then hauled up as far north as Mulberry Street, while trying, as it were, to get on the other side of Jordan. In China, nobody objects to take the fin of a shark, but in this country, when a shark extends his fin to an honest man, it is always rejected with contempt. This voracious creature is common both in the temperate and torrid zones. It has, in fact, no particular habitat, but is found in divers places in almost every latitude. 014.jpg, 232K, a motley melody. Old Mother Hubbard. Feast-loving motley over a bottle, he quite overlooks Uncle Sam. He asks not for chink, so John Bull, with a wink, Alabama proclaims all a bam. When he goes to state dinners to fill out his skin, a more patry leaks out as the turtle goes in. When he hobnobs with ministers, capital sport, all our losses at sea he condoneth in port. When by Britain's soft soaped, he's delighted to lave in the lather that's only laid on for a shave. When to Downing Street called, with a bow and a scrape he accepts, in the place of hard dollars, red tape. When a guest at the table of London's Lord Mayor, he tables our claim while addressing the chair. And whenever he mingles with transmarine knobs, he is always the prince of American snobs. Swallow, swallow etc. The inevitable enormous gooseberry of the provincial newspaper local has made its appearance. It is smaller than usual, being only 3 inches in circumference, but that is a great advantage to persons desirous of swallowing it. To whom it may be interesting. Among the Japanese students in Rutgers College, there is one who revels in the very suggestive name of Hashiguchi. Keepers of cheap boarding houses are warned against harboring that young man. Letter from a Japanese student. Mr. Punchinello, I know you, but you no me. My name's Sujiwara. I Japanese young man's friend of tycoon, great ruler. I read much your paper. Sometimes it make me laugh, sometimes cry. We have also much funny mans in Japan. I come here with other Japanese young mans to your college, what you call Rutgers, for learn to be great statesmen, for study how you call logic and diplomacy, to make treaty. Much I read your treaties and your policy much I study. How too much I can admire your great statesmans. Your sword, he great American mans. He gained much territory to the United States. He also pay much for it. No get much in return. No matter. Americans rich peoples. They tell me Alaska too cold. Japanese mans no could live there then. Much snow and ice, big rocks, and what you call fir trees. How that? Fir no grow on tree in Japan. Strange ting. Much animal they say what you call walrus there. Perhaps whale. That make me to tick of Mr. Fish. He is deep, that fish. So deep I no can understand hims. They tell me much other peoples no can understand hims too. He make much policey with his foreign relations. I ask much people to tell me who are his foreign relations. They laugh great deal and tell me Spain and General Prim. No Spain country in Japan. I no ticket much of a country, no have much how you call commerce. One thing puzzle me great deal. Here much freedom. Sometimes I tick, too much. But that island how you call it Cuba. People tell me Spain cruel to that island. Now I read much in the speeches and how you call state papers, of great American mans, that your government is friend of what you call ems too awfully hard word English very hard stop. I go get book now I have him suppressed nationalities. Now, you let Spain buy what you call gunboats and big guns and powder and balls for shoot, but you no let Cuba buy. I ask some peoples how that is. They tell me neutrality. Funny thing, neutrality. 'Fraid Japanese man's stupid, no can understand hims now. Never mind. Learn bimeby. Another thing. I no hear anyone say General Grant great mans. Only say he go muchy to clam bake, go fishy and much smoky. That's all. Why you make him you ruler then? Because that he so much smoky. Things much different here from Japan. Tycoon or Mikado no go clam bake, no go fishy. Stay at home and govern Japanese. No time go fishy. Only smoke opium sometimes. Why General Grant no smoky opium too? Good thing for Japanese trade. Since that I arrive here much peoples ask me about harakiri. One man's he ask me if that what Japanese mans eat. I laugh great deal, and tell him Japanese mans much prefer bird nest soup and shark fin. Then he laugh much great deal too. Why? The other day I tread on Professor Man's foot. He old man's, much fat, with red nose and how you call gout. He swear one little swear, but no much loud, and look much fended. I say him, no be fended and propose him harakiri for how you call satisfaction. He much surprise, and say, what harakiri? Then I tell hims that he should rip him ups and then I rip me ups so. So Japanese mans do when not satisfy. Then he laugh much great deal, say he no fended, much satisfy, and shaky hands. People here much friendly. Often say go drinky with me. I say them I no go drinky. They ask me why not. I say them Japanese man no want go talky to lamp post, shaky hands with pump, and try for makey light him cigar with dorky. So it make American man do. Drinky no good for Japanese mans. Japanese Tommy too much fond what you call cobblers. Tommy bad boy. Got drunks. Him kill. Some American mans too much questions asky. Want know too much. We have wild animal in Japan what you call boar. We much feary him. Run away when come. So I feary and run away when come mans that too much questions ask. One thing puzzle me much. For why you call your money shin plaster? I no can tell, unless that he walk away so fast. Sujiwara 015.jpg 249k 016.jpg 251k ***** End of the Project Gutenberg ebook Punchinello, Volume 1, No. 17, the 23rd of July 1870 ******** updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, You must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that S/he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg trademark symbol's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg trademark symbol and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, UT 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg trademark symbol ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg trademark symbol, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.